Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to this week's guide for Age of Wonders Planetfall. We're going to be talking about indentured spam, and I'm joined by SinSling. You want to say hi, SinSling?
Hello, I am
Nice.
back.
Yes, welcome back. We've done a couple of videos with some guests over the past few weeks. We had Orange Lex last week. We've talked to Ninju, talked to SinSling, and we've talked to Mr. No. So I'm happy to have you back. I think you were telling me that indentured spam isn't a strategy that you use a whole bunch, but you're definitely still way more familiar with the mechanics than I am. I love Syndicate, but it's just like it's a it's a race I like to focus on the noble diplomats doctrine with, and you definitely you go down the evil
Yep,
route. um,
yep. I put the slave to work. It's been a long time since I've used this build in any capacity, but I have run it before, and I'm pretty familiar with the tools to make it tick.
nice. Um, in this video, we'll be going over a couple different things. We'll start with just some general tips and some combat examples. Then we'll move into some commander perks that might help. We probably won't spend too much time talking about that. I feel like we've discussed this in quite a bit of detail in the other videos. So if you want to see that discussion, go back and watch those videos. Then we'll talk a little bit about secret techs, and we'll finish off by talking about some mod loadouts that would work in the early game or the late game. So I think we're ready to start talking about indentured in general. You got any thoughts you want to start off with, Sinsling?
So the first thing to remember when doing the indentured spam is that indentured kind of suck in auto combat if you're playing with auto combat. Um, so generally in the early game, what you want to actually do is produce a couple of runners for your scouting and to assist your main combat stack, just as cheap fodder as you wait to get your even cheaper indentured spam going. Um, the Basically after colonizers, the first thing that you want to do is get indentured contracts for the reduced upkeep and energy cost on indentured, so you can produce your really crappy unit for really dirt cheap prices. And that's kind of the way that you start maximizing the indentured spam, is making the unit dirt cheap. That way you can just keep producing them. Even if you lose them, they'll be really easy to replace.
Yeah, that's a big part of the game. I know a lot of people run out of energy pretty easily in the first few turns, so having this little discount makes a big difference. You can support a lot more units, like 3 stacks by turn. What do you say? 15, maybe a little bit
Um,
less.
yeah, you can if you really push for it, you can really get the indentured ball rolling pretty early. Um, and if I remember correctly, their energy costs will go down to 27 when you have the doctrine active, which just makes them incredibly easy to spam out.
Yeah, he's down to 23 base cost here. I'm not sure
23.
exactly sure
Yeah, see,
why.
I was used to running it back when indentured originally costed 40. So the fact that you can get them even cheaper now is just icing on the cake.
Right. And I think because it's so cheap, it may not make sense to necessarily mod them all, because you just may want a bunch of throwaway units that you can
You will
replace
have
easily.
more indentured than your Cosmite can afford to mod, basically. Um, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that means you have more units to cover more ground.
Hmm.
Makes it very easy for Syndicate to play the game of, here's this wall of indentured that you have to handle, and here's all of my cloaked units in your back door as you're trying to deal with the main front.
Yeah,
So
I think one
it
of my favorite things about the indentured is the way the overseers work with them. They can, reset their action points, which is massive. And that does work on units that you apply the cerebral control collar to, right?
Yep.
So,
Using overseers and their related mods is a very big deal for this. We can go over that in a little bit when we start talking tactical combat and stuff and mod loadouts. One of the other things that works well with the indentured spam, though, is since you're already getting them so cheap with the indentured contracts, you don't need necessarily energy sectors or the energy discount specialization on those sectors. What you can instead do is go for production cities so that you're producing them faster and get the military, basic military infrastructure, I think it is, for reducing their production costs. That way you're getting a discount on both the energy upkeep and uh, production speeds for them.
Oh yeah, that I was gonna ask you about production exploitations later, so I'm glad that we got to it nice and early because that is important. You don't need the reduced upkeep definitely for
Yeah, the
indentured. They're going
energy
to be so
sector
low.
bonuses for indentured aren't really needed since you have indentured contracts. It's better to, since you're already getting that energy reduction, it's better to go with the production sectors and the production cost reduction so that you get those units out faster and you just build that big ball of indentured even quicker.
Right, because it still costs quite a bit of production to get an indentured out there. Reducing that by like 10%, that's pretty massive. Yeah, awesome. Glad we got to that. What else is there on my notes? Uh, yeah, subjugators and stuff. They got some special interactions, but you don't like subjugators. You prefer overseers. You think that maybe
Yeah,
an overseer with
it's
5 indentured is the optimal way to play, right?
Yeah, so my big issue with subjugators is they do bring a nice utility in their revive skill, but honestly, for what a subjugator brings to a combat, it's less strain on your economy just to put a hero in a subjugator instead of trying to build an elite barracks and then build a subjugator, and then have the subjugator with your army and all that. um, what they add is not worth that additional costs. An overseer brings the necessary mods and stack buffs that you need for indentured, and if you really want to make use of uh, the revive skill that subjugators have, you can just bring that with a hero
Mm-hmm.
instead of wasting your economy trying to field a, in my opinion, pretty subpar unit.
Yeah, you said earlier when we were talking before the video that you'd prefer to have a wraith tank, which, yeah, if you're going for the spam strategy, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You wanna get a lot of cheap units out there and use your action point economy, but having just more units on the field, right?
Yeah, because if I'm spending my economy to get elite units, I don't want a subpar elite unit. I want to field the best there is, and wraith tanks, just in my opinion, hands down beat subjugators for something that you would field if you're going through the effort of making T3s. So uh, just T3s in general, getting up to wraith tanks and subjugators just isn't something that you do when you're doing the indentured spam.
Mm-hmm. And then you started to talk a little bit about the overseers, how they have those mods that are available to them. Don't think I've unlocked them yet, so we can just open up this and find them in the tree. They're relatively far
Yes.
down there.
So it's the control amplifier, um, which is, if I remember correctly, it is a map wide buff in tactical combat for all indentured.
Yeah.
Um, so two or three overseers with control amplifier and something like mantra of life or mantra of clarity can just, you're looking at a fact that a couple of units can possibly for the entire duration of a combat provide a huge stack wide buff in damage and possibly accuracy or better shields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way psionic buffs work is pretty overpowered. It's something that I think might deserve its own video, its own standalone video and discussion, because it's quite powerful. But yeah, Indentured definitely
Right.
have that
And
special interaction with
the
it.
way that overseers interact with indentured units is a prime example of why that's pretty overpowered when you can just have uh, less than a handful of units potentially buff your entire combat stack
Hmm.
with pretty ridiculous levels of strength.
Yeah, I think if you combine that with like the synthesis operation that just gives you more shields, that's like a lot of shields. That's going to be kind of hard to get through unless you've got some melee units, and
Yeah,
that's
if you
pretty
don't have melee or
situational.
something like what is it, kinetic phase manipulator, you just get kind of, you're looking at some very poor damage numbers when you're up against something like this.
Hmm. I do think it is worth mentioning that if you're going to be going for Indentured, that you're going to be a little bit weak to Amazon, because they have the ability to boost their arc resistance through grounding harness, and I think Assembly have a little natural resistance to arc damage, but you can get around that with changing your ammo type, right? Infusing
No,
it and stuff.
unfortunately, that is one of the weaknesses of going
Oh.
with indentured spam, is that the arc channel doesn't actually have any channel swaps. Um, so you're really looking at your winning by simply deploying a lot of cheap chaff. You're essentially looking to play the numbers game and hope that you just run the enemy down into the ground with superior numbers.
I'm glad that we mentioned that, because that's something I actually didn't I didn't figure out entirely before we started here. Yeah, it's easy to miss
Um,
things like that.
yeah, I believe it is the only channel that does not have status or channel swapping, but it does come with some pretty powerful effects to make up for that.
Yeah.
The fact that it has arc extension and stun module, which we'll get into how you can deploy those with indentured in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going back to overseers, if you look at cerebral amplifier, um, it's a really nasty end cap mod for the syndicate line that goes well with indentured by giving all indentured units plus 25% critical hit chance. Um, you don't even have to put it onto overseers. You can put it on pretty much anyone. The fun part here, though, is that you only need one of them, and it works on all of your indentured units in combat.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty massive given that Indenture don't have morale. It's kind of like having paused morale, but that can't be knocked down like through broken mind or anything like that. It's pretty cool.
Right, and the indentured can't gain fumble chance through negative morale either. So you're just always at massive plus critical hit chance.
I like it. That sounds really good. I got to play around with this strategy more. I got to be an evil syndicate. For
Remember,
me,
being the nice guy never gets you anywhere. Be evil and you can have everything.
oh, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I'm making like 16 influence per turn in the MP that we're playing right now. So we'll see. We'll see. Um, but yeah, when it comes to unit compositions, I like having one hero in a stack just so that they can apply their hero skills and things like that. 4 indentured and an overseer seems to make sense, but having 5 indentured and another overseer in a stack next to it seems like it would work pretty well. And throwing in a subjugator here and there would be something I would definitely consider. I'm wondering if
Yeah,
I should load up the other thing to show off the other unit compositions
when
that I
it
think would work.
when it reaches the point where you're looking at you don't have enough heroes to go in every stack, one overseer with 5 indentured is a decent way to go. If you want to bring some extra healing and resets, you can even do 2 overseers in a stack with 4 indentured. But it is very very important to have that overseer there, not just for the reset and the healing, but also because they provide a crit chance to the stack of Indentured.
Oh yeah, just by having them, they do that, huh?
Yeah, I believe overseers it's like a plus 10 or 15% crit chance.
That's awesome. Yeah, before loading up the other one, I did want to make sure I showed that you don't want to do this. You don't want to charge at them before they do something because, well, that's just a waste of action points. The AI does that all the time, but it makes way more sense to like run your guy forward, do something like that, and then reset him. Did we mention that they're invulnerable? They can't die?
No, I was waiting until the tactical combat to bring that up, but so your indenture doesn't become invulnerable, but what it does gain is stagger immunity, and it cannot fall below 1 HP for that turn.
That's massive, yeah. If you can heal up a lot of HP on the next turn, it's like, who cares if it gets down to 1 HP?
Yep.
And if you got things like this that just let you heal up, that's massive. You can just get them back with free actions and then take some other shots.
Yep.
Should I load up the other combat just to show off like some compositions?
Yeah, we can show off some higher end play.
Yeah, that's just the basics right there. So where was he? He's down here. There he is. So yeah, I got 4 indentured. This one's got the collar on it because why not? There's an indentured. You could bring a mirage because their defensive mode triggers a psionic buff at the end of their turn, meaning they can give people that extra dodge or health. Same is true of the enforcer. I think that those are nice units to bring with indentured because it can help them get a little bit closer to the enemy without taking too much damage before they can start dealing damage. Subjugator was one that I put in here before tying to SinSling, and I'm like, no, yeah, maybe I don't like this option quite as much. At least the enforcer and Mirage are tier 2 units. You can get them relatively early on. Actually, you can get enforcers right from the beginning, can't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now the important things to point out here are when it comes to the stuff like the enforcer and Mirage defense mode plays for the psionic buffs, when you're looking at using indentured spam, they're still nice to use if you happen to end up having them or bring them along. But for indentured spam, just having the overseer reset provides so much engagement power that bringing along the Mirage and Enforcer aren't really necessary, and the Overseer itself with the like if you look at this loadout that this one has, you've got Mantra of Life for +2 shields on psionic buffs, and then you have Control Amplifier, which is just +2 shields to your entire army. You don't even need a Mirage or an Enforcer to buff your entire stack because the Overseer will do that for your entire army, not just what's in its own stack.
Yeah. You know, I did just in thinking of this now, and I wish I had tested it earlier, but Mantra of Life, does that stack? Like if I had this person use that and then like another one?
It used to.
Okay.
They removed that for precisely reasons like this, where you could just, hey, look, I suddenly have +8 shields on all my indentured.
Be a little bit too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So those are basically, yeah, the type of units that I would probably bring alongside your indentured. It's worth bringing more than 2 indentured per stack. If you go down to that few units, you're kind of defeating the purpose of indentured spam and really leading into indentured. Not that it can't work, it could still work effectively. It's just not quite what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And another thing to point out here is so this Huntress that's in this stack, using the collaring other races' units, allowing them to benefit from things like the Overseer buffs and resets, not necessarily a terrible idea, but when it comes to actually spamming Indentured themselves, it doesn't quite work out because they, unfortunately, caller modded units do not benefit from Indentured contracts. So that Huntress will not gain that reduced energy cost when building it. The only thing that'll benefit from is the reduced upkeep.
Right, so this one's at 35 energy here, and I can enact that mod. That should make Indentured cheaper. And still is at 35 energy. Yeah, no, totally. That's worth showing off. Or were you talking about the production value?
No, the energy cost. Indentured contracts does not affect production cost.
See, shows how much I've used it before, huh? Cool. Should we move on to just commander perks, or you got any other general tips or combat tips that we should go over?
Let's see. So, since you're already here, one of the things to bring up, if you open up your if you go to a syndicate city and go to build a purifier.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have a purifier around here somewhere.
Well, I actually want to showcase something of the production value.
Okay.
So
Phillips on, so it just happens.
Yeah. Now
Console commands.
You'll notice here, once you find the indentured purifier, look at that energy cost. Because the syndicate purifiers are naturally indentured, they benefit from indentured contracts. And you can get really silly with this by stacking indentured contracts with Promethean armament protocols. You can essentially get the syndicate purifier down to T1 core costs.
Wow. I can actually, let's enact that just to show that off really quickly. Jeez, yeah, I haven't played around with this strategy, but I like it because purifiers are awesome. They can throw a hazard down really.
Actually,
really
if you look at that, that's even
forceful.
cheaper than a scout.
That's insane. Yeah, because the scouts are here, just barely. That's cool. It's not from a landmark or anything. That's just how it is.
Yep. And once you start adding on things like having production sector bonuses for that, you really will have a T2 unit that starts reaching almost the exact same cost as a
T1s.
as a scout unit, basically, which get pretty silly. Like, so basic purifiers aren't necessarily the best as a T2 unit, but when you start making them cost less than T1 cores and scouts, their relative power for cost just shoots through the roof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there are other secret tech syndicate units that work like that, right? I'm pretty sure they're the only ones that are outright indentured.
No, yeah, they are the only naturally indentured unit, and the only secret tech units, if I remember correctly, that you can apply the cerebral control collars to are Xenoplague and Heriter, I think. I believe Siphoners and Pustules can equip them. I'm not 100% on that, though. I don't really use those tactics. So
Yeah, no worries. I can't even remember where they are in this list of things.
Second tech, right there.
Oh wow, yeah, no, that's early. I may be able to
biological
jump
and
into...
cyborg units that are tier 1 and 2. So you can put them onto Siphoners, Pustules, and Destroyers.
Okay.
So while they'll be able to benefit from Overseer buffs, they still will not, unfortunately, gain the advantages of the indentured contracts' reduced energy production costs.
Yeah, you could put this
They
on
will
like
get the
a
reduced upkeep,
hacker, I
though.
think, and maybe.
Unfortunately, you can't stick them on any of the syndicate flagged secret tech units because they have the syndicate tag, and the control collars require non-syndicate. What you can do is go and grab other races and build your secret tech unit from them with control collars, but
Yes.
that takes a lot more effort to field.
Yeah, I've heard about that strategy. That one's a little trickier to pull off. All right, I think it's time to look at commander perks.
Uh,
Just briefly.
thought we were gonna skip that for this one though. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I guess the only one that I'd really mention for indentured spam specifically would be martial tradition for the reduced tech cost on weapon trees. Because there are plays that you can make that involve using indentured spam with the arc mods, and being able to get those faster helps a lot.
Yeah, totally. I agree 100%. Being able to stun a bunch of units all at once, that's super nice. The earlier you get that, the better it is, because you can take advantage of that and clear out more sites. Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this because we've talked about this a whole lot before in other videos. I think you default to energy cache, default to no vices unless you really need it for something else. And yeah, the equipment's not important for this at all, is it? Maybe take something with some good range, a sniper or a rifle.
Yeah, the sniper or the syndicate assault bike, but other than that, when it comes to indentured spam, it's really more about if you plan on going for the only two choices when it comes to indentured spam are: do you want to go for early control amplifier or early arc mods? And that basically comes down to does your background matter, or do you take does martial tradition matter or not? Is basically what that comes down to.
Mm-hmm. All right. We can move on to secret tech notes now. That's all I think we really need to say on that. So yeah, we started talking a little bit about Promethean. It's great because you can boost your accuracy through burning, and it allows you to engage at basically a safe distance for Indentured, at the end of their range. There's indentured purifiers. Plasmoids are pretty easy to spam out there, so if you want to spam a lot of units, you got that to support you. I don't know if there's anything else I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about with Promethean.
There is the you kind of showed it off previously, but the purification field, because indentured like to get themselves killed horribly, just having all of that extra healing helps a lot, especially as a cheap mod option in the early game.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have these two stages of indentured where you have the early spamming phase of it, where you basically just have a lot of indentured, but with almost no mods or just T1 mods to slightly increase their effectiveness. And then the late game where you start throwing Cosmite at them to make them extremely lethal platforms. Having Purification Field is one of those mods where it's really nice to have it for that early phase of indentured spam.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I noticed it a lot in that playthrough that we were just looking at. Just having a little bit of healing made a massive difference. So maybe we can talk about Number next. What do you think? Is that a decent one to talk about?
So Number's a little bit weird when it comes to the indentured spam, because the idea isn't necessarily to spam the indentured themselves, but it's to max out your bonuses for initiates and malictors.
Yep.
Where you get the field by servitude bonus, which just causes them to start doing really silly amounts of damage, especially malictors with their chain attack.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, they don't really necessarily add a whole lot to the indentured spam tactic, just because the stuff that you would use to make them better is kind of a little bit more expensive. I guess that you could technically use consuming gaze as kind of like a alternate version of purification field, But that's the only really thing that I can they would add there, just because something like Mark of the Dark Sun, while it's a nice damage boost, your Indentured aren't necessarily going to be farming kills for the stacked bonus damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important to bring up. The consuming gaze, I think, would be a lot more helpful than Mark of the Dark Sun. They just don't do that much damage to start off with. I think the boost that they would get from it would be pretty minor. And yeah, like I'm glad you said the stuff about the Malactor and Initiates and the way that they boost damage. I'm not sure if having like one Malactor and 5 Indentured in a stack is a competitive strategy for multiplayer, but something tells me that would work pretty well. I don't think Initiate plus 5 Indentured would work very well, but Malactor would, right?
Having a Malictor that is having a couple of Malictors throughout your army while using an army of Indentured with some Overseers can get pretty competitive. For Initiates don't really work too well with the Indentured spam strategy directly. It's more of you're just going to try and max out the Field by Servitude bonus and then spam Indentured. Malictors obviously have a much higher cost though, so trying to spam them is not really always feasible. So having them behind a wall of Indentured to where they can just throw out ridiculous amounts of damage, thanks to Field by Servitude, is the way to go with them. Just so you're not always constantly paying for the high Malictor cost to keep a huge army of them around.
Yeah. I think one fun thing about having Malactors and Indenture together means you can get a lot of jumping damage. The Soul Seeker comes with jumping damage, and if you put the Arc Extension module, I think it is, on your Indentured, then your arc damage is going to jump around just like the Malactor's attack. Pretty fancy stuff. Anything else before we move on?
Their end mod, Avatar of the Abyss, is kind of a nice little alternative to using stun module if you happen to get up to it.
What was it called? Avatar?
Avatar of the Abyss, I believe.
Okay.
Yep. To where you're inflicting panic instead of stun.
Yeah, totally. I don't think I've used that before in a game.
And because it applies Broken Mind, you can actually use the Indentured to soften up targets and give them Broken Mind stacks before the Malictors just murdered them.
Right, yeah, totally. Seems fun. I'll have to give that a try too. Alright, the next one I had in my notes was Heritor. I think it makes sense to talk about them next.
When you're doing Indentured spam, Heritor and Xenoplague both kind of lose out in the fact that you don't get the reduced production cost for them being Indentured if you collar them, especially Xenoplague since they're free spawn units. But what you can do is you have access to a whole bunch of action reset.
Salutations,
Actually, shoot, this is a play I need to make more now that I'm thinking about it, because if it's a really pricey, really late game build, but if you were to use a Quintessence Arc to link with all of your Indentured who have Arc Extension and Arc Stun module, you could give them a whole bunch of damage by adding an additional, I think it's like almost 50% bonus damage through the Quintessence Arc.
Wow. Yeah,
but
I never
that
used
is
that piece, the Quintessence Arc.
Yeah, I need to get back around to using them at some point, or trying to use them. But generally speaking, it's not this wouldn't necessarily count as an Indentured spam strategy, just because you're looking at investing so much into so many different branches just to try and utilize one little thing. But it is worth noting that it does exist and you can use it. Sacrament of Decay, I think it is, just all of that extra bonus damage, funneling that into indentured units can get pretty scary.
I can't spell.
It's right there on the Quintessence arc, but yeah, Sacrament of Decay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was looking at that a second ago. I mean, just to deviate away from indentured spam, this is one of my favorite combinations because you can get a lot of happiness from like Heritor. There's that, and then there's like the bread and circuses thing that you can do as Syndicate. So I think it's an interesting combination for a lot of different reasons. The fact that Siphoners can action reset, as well as Overseers, is super powerful. It's super nice. You've got a little bit of flexibility with how you go about actually resetting your units. The Siphoners are far more flexible because they can action reset any unit, whereas Overseers
At
can only do
ranged as well.
that are what?
At ranged as well.
Oh
Since
yeah,
Devotion is actually ranged.
right.
And then if you collar Siphoners, you can actually use Overseers to reset Siphoners.
I haven't done that. That sounds nice. But you can't use Devotion like twice. Like that wouldn't make sense now, because you send away all your charges, and it takes a charge to do that.
Yep.
Anything else on the Heritors?
No, that's
Syndicate?
pretty much it from my end.
Yeah, they can do a lot of damage pretty quickly because of the resets, especially with Siphoners resetting your heroes. I think Overseers resetting the Indentures, Siphoners and resetting your heroes is like, yeah, that's a strong combination. And yeah, I think the next thing we can talk about is, well, you said a little bit about Xenoplague. Should we talk more about Xenoplague?
No, I don't think Xenoplague necessarily needs any coverage on that, because their play is more to use them with enforcers. With indentured spam, it just doesn't work out as much because of you're looking at melee units with overseers who have a one range reset. That just doesn't quite work out.
Yeah.
What you do have is the other one worth mentioning when it comes to indentured spam is synthesis. Because they have some very early, very effective mods for boosting indentured. For going back to the overseer stack bonus for critical chance, if you take that and stack it with the synthesis mod for increasing critical hit chance, the targeting daemon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You stick that onto your indentured, and they now have a 20% critical hit chance. So
wow,
they start getting really silly, and then you do something like throw a control amplifier on there. Your indentured now have a 45% hit crit chance. And it can just get really silly from there to where your indentured are just critting nonstop.
Yeah.
Or not control amplifier, but their end cap mod for the plus 25% crit.
This one.
Yeah, that one. Yep.
Yeah, no, I think what I like about synthesis is it's similar to the reasons I like Promethean. It allows you to kind of keep your range units a little bit further back and safe, and through mods and things like that. And yeah, it's not like a melee heavy thing. It's more about kind of like healing and keeping your ranged people safe so they can keep engaging.
Yep. Now there is one. This is a really expensive play that you can use with indenture spam. But if you go over to malware daemon at the end of the synthesis tree, right there, the autonomous. Yep, that one. So if I remember correctly, will inherit any compatible mods that do not grant an active ability. You can have all of your indentured equip deployable malware daemon, arc extension, and stun module, and you will now have a massive army of units that are capable of stunning and jumping with their attacks.
Wow. So I wasn't sure if
It's
you would
really
want the arc thingy that stuns people that get close by, but I mean, you're gonna just swarm the map, then you might as well.
Oh yeah. Who needs to worry about arc retaliation when you've got an entire swarm of... So if you bring 18 Indentured to a fight and they have deployable malware daemon, you now have, what is that, 32 units who will have jumping, stunning attacks. At that point, it just doesn't matter. Your enemy is dead.
Oh, I may have misunderstood you. You say you don't want arc retaliation, you want arc extension, right?
Arc extension and stun module.
Yeah, okay. I misunderstood. That makes sense though. I like those in combination with each other. I thought you were talking about the this one, yeah, retaliation. Alright, so
No.
we have Celestian and Void Tech left. Are you ready to move on?
So, with Celestian Void Tech, I don't really think they add much to the Indentured spam build. You kind of have the... Celestian's got the nice little addition of having an early heal and stagger resistance, but neither one of them is really contributing to the spam out Indentured units for less and with more effectiveness. Things like, phase walk doesn't really matter. The stagger resistance, and the fact that enlightened doesn't affect indentured because they're not affected by morale, just makes them not as appealing as they would normally be.
You know, I actually didn't think about that about enlightened. That's very important to mention actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll get the 20% extra damage if the enemy is soul burned, but the morale is useless to you. So
Yeah. And I think most people know about the stagger resistance mod. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's like the first.
Penance of Tranquility, which is okay on a repeating unit, but since you're missing out on part of the bonus of enlightened, it's just not adding as much as it usually would to most people.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think there's potentially a strategy there with healing and resurgence and stuff, but I don't think it'd be as good as some of the other ones available to the Syndicate if you go down a different secret tech route. So yeah, Void Tech. What can we say about Void Tech?
Void Tech doesn't add a whole lot. You're not really going to be making effective use of Quantum Avatar. You're not really going to be making effective use of Void Augments with Stasis Pocket Inducer. You're not really getting much out of it, aside from you could potentially use something like Void Barriers to make it difficult for enemy melee to engage you. But that's just something Void Tech does. It's not really just specific to helping with the indentured spam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think having the extra mobility is nice for positioning, repeating shots, just so like you can get the most out of it. You know, you're in an optimal position and you reset and you can make the most out of your next three. Also having overseers be able to walk through things to get to one distance away from an indenture to be able to use cerebral overdrive can be kind of nice, but I'm not seeing a lot of synergies here.
Yeah.
Oh, phase manipulators are nice. Obviously, if you don't know about phase manipulators, they're really really good at healing people because of that evacuate skill. I think it heals 25 HP and maybe gives shields. I could be wrong about those shields.
Yeah. phase manipulators in general are just nice. You can use them to pull them into your group of indentured, but honestly, that's just something that works with any ranged army, pulling them into getting murdered.
Oh yeah, abducting a person into your firing line. Yeah, it's pretty
Yep.
nice. Okay. I think we can now talk a little bit about the mods. We've already talked quite a bit about them, so this probably won't take too long to go over. Yeah, go for
So
it.
what we can, yeah, if we go over early and late game mod loadouts and kind of what your goal should be for getting mods. When you're looking at early indentured, you don't want to spend a lot of cosmite on them because they're going to most likely be dying way more often than you would like them to if you're using auto combat. In manual combat, if you feel like modding them up and taking that risk, it's definitely feasible just because manual combat, you can save things a lot easier. Generally, you want to go cheap early on with only like up to 2 tier 1 mods. Something like Purification Field is a really good mod to use on them.
Yeah.
Stuff like the Targeting Daemon Shell. And then you've got like Static Buildup and Arc. Ooh,
Haven't
sorry
unlocked that
about that.
one. No, it's fine.
Static Buildup module with Arc Retaliation. You can even use what is it? The SciTech Vision enhancers for the additional shields, or even just the flanking bonus for a little bit of extra damage and accuracy. But generally speaking, you don't want to go with like a full 3 mod loadout. You want to keep them cheap and light so you can mod as many as possible without focusing all of your cosmite too much on a couple of units. Just because you're going to have so many indentured when you're spamming indentured, that there's a good chance your cosmite income is not going to be able to keep up with them.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I would. If I was gonna choose one, I would go with the Purification Field, just because of the likelihood that they're gonna get low on health. They're gonna run one forward, really far forward, and then need a little bit of healing. I can't believe I just noticed this, but at prime rank they get a little bit extra range. So yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's pretty nice.
We haven't mentioned that. If you manage to level up an army of indentured, they start getting really stupid because plus range is one of the best things that you can have as a prime rank, and going from 7 to 8 range doesn't sound like much, but it makes a world of difference.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the things that makes troopers good when you add rail accelerators to them. Only indentured don't have to spend a mod slot to get that added range. They just have to survive until prime rank.
Yeah, it can happen if you care about your indentured. Maybe if you throw in some enforcers, just saying. I like those units. They're fun units. Add a lot of defensive capabilities to your army. But yeah, I agree what you were saying about the early game mods. Keep it light. Grab a couple things that maybe give them healing or feed into the arc damage channel. There are some decent secret tech options, but you don't want to put anything too heavy on them because they can die pretty easily.
Yeah, you want to keep them light. That way you're not overspending cosmite. It's not going to hurt as much when you lose one of them, and you're able to mod up more of them at once, so that you have a wider army with more mods on it versus just having a handful of units with good mods.
All right, I think we can go to the other save and show the later game stuff off, right?
One of the things that I want to talk about is determining how you're going to transition into mid game when doing your indentured spam. Right from the get-go, you really want to pick one of two things when you're doing indentured spam. You want to either go for control amplifiers, which is going to mean that you're going to be focusing on the syndicate tech line, getting up to that so you can buff all of your indentured using your overseers. or you're going to want to pick to go for arc mods, which is transitioning very quickly into having a powerhouse indentured unit, where you've went from very low investment of Cosmite on your indentured to massive investment of Cosmite on your indentured. So it's very important that you pick one of those two to do right from the get-go when you're doing indentured spam, because you don't want to hit this kind of lull where you haven't picked one of those and your indentured suddenly start falling off in effectiveness because you haven't hit one of the two major power spikes for them.
Oh yeah, that is important. If you just go like a little bit down this one and switch over to this one, and no, you're gonna get a lot less out of that value.
Indentured start, and that'll cause indentured to really lose their value. You've got to pick a way to make them hit a power spike so that they can stay relevant for your game plan, versus you suddenly have a bunch of units who aren't really doing as much as you would prefer them to do.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty torn on which one I would go down first, because arc can be countered, as we talked about earlier, pretty easily by certain races. So if you know you're facing off against Amazon or Assembly, maybe you're going to go for the Syndicate tech tree. But I generally actually don't go that far down this one. I get to deploy Sentinel and I stop thinking about it usually. I go into other things because I love deploy Sentinel. And these are kind of expensive, but I don't know.
Right, and just think about how close you are to control amplifier when you make that switch.
Yeah. Now I'll have to rethink it, definitely. Alright, the late game stuff we showed off a little bit earlier. We've already talked a little bit about it. You want to put those two arc mods on there,
we can just bring this back up to touch back up on it really quickly. So when it comes to your late game mods, the key things for Indentured is definitely having stuff like arc extension, and then some kind of additional disabling inflict like stun module, or if you get into the really late game stuff like Avatar of the Abyss, just something where you can lock down your enemy with jumping attacks and really make it difficult for them to engage those indentured and kill them. And it's kind of the point where you start just thinking large amounts of Cosmite into your indentured, so that your enemy's suddenly having to deal with a lot of chaff units who have suddenly turned into these powerhouses that can potentially shut down their entire army before they can respond.
I will add that I think if you get them to prime rank, it is worth investing in the bigger mods a little bit more, like this one, and maybe switch out this one for another bigger mod, just so that you're making the most out of your
prime rank indentured are pretty much always worth the investment in Cosmite to make them more survivable or inflict more damage.
Out of the options that I have here, which one would you put in for the vision enhancers? Maybe the bombs? Those are pretty good.
I would definitely put in the bombs, because you'll notice prime rank bonus applies to Phoenix bombs. Yeah. So you're looking at a range 10 alpha strike with the indentured that is just really silly.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even take it further and like rekit the indentured into being more of a Promethean built unit by giving it a thermal targeting array. That way, and also switch out other indentured to make use of thermal targeting array, so that any indentured that brings Phoenix bomb launcher and applies burning to the enemy suddenly provides a massive boost in accuracy and damage to all the other indentured that are working with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that dropped the damage potential down quite a bit. That's a lot of damage. Phoenix bombs, definitely.
That
worth
it is,
getting.
but at the same time, once you inflict burning on an enemy, you get that damage back, and you get additional accuracy.
Yeah, I love that about Promethean, the extra accuracy. I think that's part of why I actually like Synthesis for uh, Indentured Spam too, is getting that extra accuracy lets you stay a little bit further back.
Yep, lets you play around long range penalties better.
It sounds like you don't really go for arc retaliation very often, unless maybe you're going against a player or an AI that has a crazy amount of melee units, right?
I generally see it as more of like an early game mod, which is where most of my games are probably in what most people would consider to be the early phase. But basically, it kind of drops off. Like if you're facing someone who's able to fight you from more than 3 hexes away, it loses all of its value basically, because what it's really bringing is that stun.
Yeah.
There's the edge case of where your enemy has arc damage, and so you're actually getting like 3 defensive stats out of it. Um, but generally speaking, I wouldn't use it except for as an early mod to improve the indentured early game. I'm probably going to swap that out basically as soon as I can for some really powerful mod.
Okay, cool. Well, that's everything I had in my notes. Anything you want to add in here before we wrap up?
Um, we already went over it, but the overseer mods having that control amplifier and enforce control thing, or was it? Yeah, cerebral amplifier. That's what I keep forgetting the name of it. But adding basically with those 2 mods, your overseers are now AoE spy buffers for every single indentured in a combat, not just the ones in their own stack. And with the control amplifier, you have additional crit chance now. So you're looking at like plus 25% damage, plus 25% crit, which is actually plus 35% crit just because of the normal overseer bonus. And the really fun part here is that with control amplifier, you only need to have one indentured or just like one hero bringing that, or not control amplifier. What is the other one called?
Cerebral.
Cerebral amplifier. Okay. With cerebral amplifier, you only need to have one overseer bring this mod. Your other overseers that are running control amplifier can bring additional psi buffs to just make the indentured ball really stupid. Things like mantra of clarity, or if you know that your enemy is running thermal or biochemical damage, you can use focus flames and focus venom for the massive additional resistances.
Oh, I hadn't considered that for getting that just for the resistances. Cool. Yeah, that'd make a big difference. That's like having 4 extra armor.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that you were able to join me today to go over all these details. I think we got a lot of good information out, and yeah, appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to be here again. Sorry I missed the last couple of weeks.
Hey, no worries. We'll see you around.
Alrighty. See you later.